8. Decision. The mastery of procrastination. The seventh step to riches. Accurate analysis of 25,000 men and women who had experienced failure disclosed the fact that lack of decision was near the head of the list of the 30 major causes of failure. There is no mere statement of a theory, it is a fact. Procrastination, the opposite of decision, is a common enemy that practically everybody must conquer. You will have an opportunity to test your capacity to reach quick and definite decisions when you finish reading this book and ready to begin putting into an action the principle it describes. Analysis of 700 people who accumulated fortunes well beyond the $1 million mark disclosed the fact that every one of them had the habit of reaching decisions promptly, of changing these decisions slowly, if and when they are changed. People who fail to accumulate money without exception have the habit of reaching decisions, if at all, very slowly, and of changing these decisions quickly and often. One of the Henry Ford's most outstanding qualities was his habit of reaching decisions quickly and definitely and changing them slowly. This quality was so pronounced in Mr. Ford that it gave him the reputation of being obstinate. It was this quality which prompted Mr. Ford to continue to manufacture his famous Model T, the world's ugliest car, when all of his advisors and many of the purchasers of the car were urging him to change it. Perhaps Mr. Ford delayed too long in making the change, but the other side of the story is that Mr. Ford's firmness of decision yielded a great huge before the change in the model became necessary. There is but little doubt that Mr. Ford's habit of definiteness of decision assumed the proportion of the obstinacy, but this quality is preferable to slowness in reaching decisions and quickness in changing them. Majority of people who fail to accumulate money sufficient for their needs are generally easily influenced by the opinion of others. They permit the newspapers and the gossiping neighbors to do their thinking for them. Opinions are the cheapest commodities on the earth. Everyone has a flock of opinions ready to be wished upon anyone who will accept them. If you are influenced by opinions when you reach decisions, you will not succeed in an undertaking, much less in that of transmuting your own desire into money. If you are influenced by the opinions of others, you will have no desire of your own. Keep your own counsel when you begin to put into practice the principle described here. By reaching your own decisions and following them, take no one into your confidence except the members of your mastermind group, and be sure in your selection of this group that you choose only those who will be in complete sympathy and harmony with your purpose. Close friends and relatives, while not meaning to do so, often handicap one through opinions and sometimes through ridicule, which is meant to be humorous. Those of men and women carry inferiority complex with them all through life because some well-meaning but ignorant person destroyed their confidence through opinions or ridicule. You have a brain and mind of your own. Use it and reach your own decision. If you need facts or information from other people to enable you to reach decisions, as you probably will in many instances, acquire these facts or secure the information you need quietly without disclosing your purpose. It is a characteristic of people who have but a smattering or a veneer of knowledge to try to give it the impression that they have much knowledge. Such people generally do too much talking and too little listening. Keep your eyes and ears wide open and your mouth closed if you wish to acquire the habit of prompt decision. Those who talk too much, do little else. If you talk more than you listen, you not only deprive yourself of many opportunities to accumulate useful knowledge, but you also disclose your plans and purposes to people who will take great delight in defeating you because they envy you. Remember also that every time you open your mouth in the presence of a person who has an abundance of knowledge, you display to that person your exact stock of knowledge or your lack of it. Genuine wisdom is usually conspicuous through modesty and silence. Keep in mind the fact that every person with whom you associate is like yourself seeking the opportunity to accumulate money. If you talk about your plans too freely, you may be surprised when you learn that some other person has beaten you to your goal by putting into action ahead of you the plans of which you talked unwisely. Let one of your decisions be to keep a closed mouth and open eyes and ears. As a reminder to yourself to follow this advice, it will be helpful if you copy the following epigram in large letters and place it where you will see it daily. Tell the world what you intend to do, but first show it. This is the equivalent of saying that deeds and not words are what count most. Freedom or death on a decision. The value of decision depends on the courage required to make them. The great decision which served as the foundation of civilizations were reached by assuming great risk, which often meant the possibility of death. Lincoln's decision to issue his famous proclamation of emancipation, which gave freedom to enslaved people of America, was taken with the full understanding that his act would turn thousands of friends and political supporters against him. He knew too that the carrying out of that proclamation would mean death to thousands of men on the battlefield. In the end, it cost Lincoln his life. That required courage. Socrates' decision to drink the cup of poison rather than compromise in his personal belief was a decision of courage. It turned time ahead of thousands years and gave to people then unborn the right of freedom of thought and of speech. The decision of General Robert E. Lee when he came to the parting of the way with the Union and took up the cause of South was one of the courage, for he well knew it might cost him his own life and that it would surely cost the lives of others. But the greatest decision of all time, as far as an American citizen is concerned, was reached in Philadelphia on 4 July 1776, when 56 men signed their names to a document they well knew would bring freedom to all Americans or leave everyone of the 56 hanging from a gallows. You have heard of this famous document, but you may not have drawn from it great lesson in personal achievement it so plainly taught. We all remember the date of this momentous decision, but few of us realize what courage that decision required. We remember history as it was taught. We remember dates and the names of the men who fought. We remember Valley Forge and Yorktown. We remember George Washington and Lord Cornwallis. But we know little of the real forces behind these names, states, and places. We know still less of the intangible power which guaranteed freedom for Americans long before Washington's armies reached Yorktown. We read the history of the Revolution and falsely imagine that George Washington was the father of America, that it was he won Americans their freedom. This truth is that Washington was only an accessory after the fact because his victory for his armies had been ensured long before Lord Cornwallis surrendered. This is not intended to rob Washington of any of the glory he so richly merited. Its purpose, rather, is to give greater attention to the astounding power that was real cause of his victory. It is nothing short of tragedy that the writers of history have entirely missed even the slightest reference to the irresistible power that gave birth and freedom to the nation destined to set up new standards of independence for all the people of the earth. I say it is a tragedy because it is the same self power that must be used by every individual which surmounts the difficulties of life and forces life to pay the price asked. Let us briefly review the events that gave birth to this power. The story begins with an accident in Boston on 5 March 1770. British soldiers were patrolling the streets, openly threatening the citizens by their presence. The colonists resented armed men and marching in their midst. They began to express their resentment openly, hurling stones and as well as epithets at the marching soldiers until the commanding officer gave orders, fix bayonets, and charge. The battle was on. It resulted in the death and injury of many. The incident aroused such resentment that the provincial assembly, made up of prominent colonists, called a meeting for the purpose of talking definite action. Two of the members of that assembly were John Hancock and Samuel Adams. They spoke up courageously and declared that a move must be made to eject all British soldiers from Boston. Remember this, a decision in the minds of two men might properly be called the beginning of the freedom that Americans now enjoy. Remember too that the decision of these two men called for faith and courage because it was dangerous. Before the assembly adjourned, Samuel Adams was appointed to call on the governor of the province and Hutchinson and demand the withdrawal of British troops. The request was granted and the troops were removed from the Boston, but the incident was not closed. It has caused a situation destined to change the entire trend of civilization. Strange, is it not how the great changes such as American Revolution and many wars often have their beginnings in the circumstances which seem unimportant? It is interesting also to observe that these important changes usually begin in the form of definite decision in the minds of relatively small number of people. Few of us know the history of America well enough to realize that John Hancock, Samuel Adams, and Richard Henry Lee of the province Virginia were the real fathers of the country. Richard Henry Lee became an important factor in this story due to the fact that he and Samuel Adams communicated frequently by correspondence, sharing freely their fears and their hopes concerning the welfare of the people of their provinces. From this practice, Adams conceived that the idea that a mutual exchange of letters between the 13 colonies might help to bring about the coordination of effort so badly needed in the connection with the solution of their problems. In March 1772, 2 years after the clash with soldiers in Boston, Adams presented this idea to the Assembly in the form of motion that a correspondence committee to be established among the colonies with definitely appointed correspondents in each colony for the purpose of friendly cooperation for the betterment of the colonies, British America. Mark well this incident. It was the beginning of the organization of far flung power destined to give freedom to Americans. The mastermind group has already been organized. It is consisted of Adams, Lee, and Hancock. The Committee of Correspondence was organized. Observe that this move provided the way for increasing the power of the mastermind group by adding to it men from all the colonies. Take notice that this procedure constituted the first organized planning of disgruntled colonists. In union, there is a strength. The citizens of the colonies had been waging disorganized warfare against the British soldiers through incidents similar to the Boston riot, but nothing of the benefit had been accomplished. Their individual grievances had not been consolidated under one mastermind. No group of individuals had put their hearts, minds, and souls and body together in one definite decision to settle their difficulty with the British once and for all until Adams, Hancock, and Lee got together. Meanwhile, the British were not idle. They too were doing some planning and masterminding on their account with the advantage of having money and organized soldiery behind them. The Crown appointed Gage to supplant Hutchinson as the governor of the Massachusetts. One of the new governors of First Act was to send the messenger to call Samuel Adams for the purpose of endeavoring to stop his opposition by fear. We can best understand the spirit of what happened by quoting the conversation between Colonel Fenton, the messenger of sent by Gage, and Adams. Colonel Fenton, I have been authorized by Governor Gage to assure you, Mr. Adams, that the governor has been empowered to confer upon you such benefits as you would be satisfactory. Endeavor to win Adams by promise of bribes, upon the condition that you engage to cease in your opposition to the measures of the government. It is the governor's advice to you, sir, in not to incur in the further displeasure of His Majesty. Your conduct has been such as you make liable to penalties of Act of Henry VIII, by which persons can be sent to England for trial for reason, or misprison for treason has the discretion of the governor of a province. But by changing your political course, you will not receive great personal advantages, but you will make your peace with the king. Samuel Adams had the choice of two decisions. He could seize his position and receive personal bribes, or he could continue and run the risk of being hanged. Clearly, the time had come when Adams forced to reach instantly a decision that could have cost his life. The majority of people would have found it difficult to reach such decision. The majority would have sent back an evasive reply, but not Adams. He insisted Colonel Fenton to give his word of honor to deliver the governor the answer exactly as Adams gave it to him. Adams' answer was, "Then you may tell Governor Gage that I trust I have long since made my peace with the King of Kings. No personal consideration shall induce me to abandon the righteous cause of my country, and tell Governor Gage it is the advice of Samuel Adams to him no longer to insult the feelings of exasperated people. Comment as to character of this man seems unnecessary. It must obvious to all who read this astounding message that its sender possessed the loyalty of the highest order. This is important. Racketeers and dishonest politicians have prostituted the honor for which such a man as Adams died. When Governor Gage received Adams' caustic reply, he flew into a rage and issued proclamation which read, "I do hereby in His Majesty's name offer and promise His most gracious pardon to all who shall forthwith lay down their arms and reduce to the duties peaceful subjects, expecting only from the benefit of such pardon, Samuel Adams and John Hancock, whose offences are too flagitious in nature to admit any of the other consideration but that of courting punishment." As one might say in modern slang, Adams and Hancock were on the spot. The threat of irate governor forced the two men to reach their another decision, equally as dangerous. They hurriedly called a secret meeting of their staunchest followers. Here the mastermind group began to take on momentum. After the meeting had called to order, Adams locked the door, places the key in his pocket, and informed all the present that it was imperative that a congress of the colonists be organized, and that no man should leave the room until the decision for such a congress had been reached. Great excitement followed. Some weighed the possible consequences of such radicalism, fear. Some expressed grave doubts as to wisdom of a so definite decision in defiance of the crown. Locked in that room were two men immune to fear, blind to possibility of failure. Hancock and Adams, through the influence of their minds, the others were induced to agree that through the correspondence committee arrangements should be made for meeting of the First Continental Congress to be held in Philadelphia on 5th of September 1774. Remember this date, it is more important than 4 July 1776. If there had been no decision to hold a Continental Congress, there could have been no signing of the Declaration of Independence. Before the first meeting of the new Congress, another leader in a different section of the country was deep in throes of publishing a summary view of the rights of British America. He was Thomas Jefferson of the province of Virginia, whose relationship to Lord Dunmore, representative of the Crown in Virginia, was strained as that of Hancock and Adams with their governor. Shortly after his famous Summary of Rights was published, Jefferson was informed that he was subject to prosecution for high treason against His Majesty's government. Inspired by a threat of one of the Jefferson's colleagues, Patrick Henry, boldly spoke his mind, concluding his remarks with a sentence that shall remain. Shortly after his famous Summary of Rights was published, Jefferson was informed that he was subject to prosecution for high treason against His Majesty's government. Inspired by the threat, one of the Jefferson's colleagues, Patrick Henry, boldly spoke his mind, concluding his remarks with a sentence that shall remain forever as a classic. If this be treason, then make it the cost of it. It was such a man as these who, without power, without authority, without military strength, without money, sat in the solemn consideration of the destiny of the colonies, beginning at the opening of the First Continental Congress and continuing at intervals of 2 years until on 7 June 1776 Richard Henry led arose, addressed the chair, and to startled assembly made this motion. Gentlemen, I make the motion that these united colonies are and of right out to be free and independent state. That they be absolved from all allegiance to British Crown, and that all political connection between them and the state of the Great Britain is and ought to be totally dissolved. Lee's astounding motion was discussed fervently and at such length that he began took the floor and declared in a clear, firm voice, Mr. President, we have discussed this issue for days. It is why then, sir, do we longer delay? Why still deliberate? Let this happy day give birth to an American republic. Let her arise not to devastate and to conquer, but to re-establish the reign of peace and of law. The eyes of Europe are fixed upon us. She demands us of living a freedom that may exhibit a contrast in the felicity of the citizen to every increasing tyranny. Before his motion was finally voted upon, Lee was called back to Virginia because of serious family illness. But before leaving, he placed his cause in the hands of his friend, Thomas Jefferson, who promised to fight until favorable action was taken. Shortly thereafter, the President of Congress, Hancock, appointed Jefferson as a chairman of a committee to draw up a Declaration of Independence. Long and hard the committee labored on a document which would mean, when accepted by the Congress, that every man who signed it would be signing his own death warrant. Should the colonize lose in the fight with Great Britain, which was sure to follow. The document was drawn, and on 28th June, the original draft was read before the Congress. For several days, it was discussed already and made ready. On July 4, 1776, Thomas Jefferson stood before the assembly and fearlessly read the most momentous decision ever placed upon paper. When in the course of human events it is necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. When Jefferson finished, the document was voted upon, accepted, and signed by the 56 men, every one taking his own life upon his decision to write his name. By that decision came into existence a nation designed, destined to bring to humankind forever the privilege of making decisions. By decisions made in a similar spirit of faith, and only by such decisions can people solve their personal problem and win for themselves high states of material and spiritual wealth. Let us not forget this. Analyze the event that led to the Declaration of Independence and be convinced that American nation was born of a decision created by mastermind consisting of 56 men. Note well the fact that it was their decision that ensured the success of Washington armies before because the spirit of that decision was in the heart of every soldier who fought with him and served as the spiritual power that recognizes no such feeling thing as failure. Note also, with great personal benefit, that the power that gave America its freedom is the self same power that must be used by every individual who became self determining. The power is made up of principles who described in this book. In the story of the Declaration of Independence, it will not be difficult to detect at least six of these principles: desire, decision, faith, persistence, the mastermind, and organized planning. Throughout this philosophy will be found the suggestion that thought backed by a strong desire has a tendency to transmute itself a physical equivalent. Before passing on, I wish to leave with you the suggestion that one may find in this story and in the story of the Organization of United States Steel Corporation, a perfect description of method by which through thought makes us this astounding transformation. In your search for the secret of the method, do not look for a miracle because you will not find it. You will find only the eternal laws of nature. These laws are available to every person who has faith and courage to use them. They may be used to bring freedom to a nation or to accumulate riches. There is no change, charge save the time necessary to understand and appropriate them. Those who reach decisions promptly and definitely know what they want and generally get it. The leaders in every walk of life decide quickly and firmly. That is the major reason why they are leaders. The world has been the habit of making room for people whose words and actions show they know where they are going. Indecision is a habit that usually begins in youth. The habit takes on permanency as the youth goes through the school and even through university or college without definiteness of purpose. The major weakness of all education system is that they neither teach nor encourage the habit of definite decision. It would be beneficial if no university or college would permit the enrollment of any student unless until the student declared their major purpose in graduating. It would be of still greater benefit if every student starting school were compelled to accept training in the habit of decision and forced to pass a satisfactory examination on this subject before being permitted to advance. The habit of indecision acquired before because of the deficiencies of our school systems goes with the students into occupations they choose, if in fact they choose their occupations. Generally young people just out of the school seek any job that can be found. They take pass the first place they find because they have fallen into the habit of indecision. 98 out of every 100 people working for wages today are in the position they hold because they lack the definiteness of decision to plan a definite position and the knowledge of how to choose an employer. Definiteness of decision always requires courage, sometimes very great courage. The 56 men who signed the Declaration of Independence stake their lives on the decision to affix their signatures to that document. People who reach a definite decision to procure particular job and make life pay the price they ask to do not stake their life on that decision. They stake their economic freedom, financial independence, riches, and desirable business and professional positions are not within the reach of person who neglects or refuses to expect, plan, and demand these things. The person who desires riches in the same spirit that Samuel Adams desired freedom for the colonies is sure to accumulate wealth. A modern example of a person who displayed courage in making decisions is Fred Smith, the founder of Federal Express, FEDEX, FedEx. When Smith was a student in an economics class at Yale University, his professor stated that the air freight was the wave of the future and would be the primary source of revenue for the airlines. Smith wrote a paper disagreeing. His argument was that the passenger route patterns that were the primary airline routes were wrong for freight. He noted that because cost would not come down with the volume, the only way airweight could be profitable was through a new whole system that would reach out smaller cities as well as big ones and be designed for packages, not people. The professor considered this entirely unfeasible and gave Smith's paper a low grade. Smith's concept was to start an all freight airline that would fly primarily at night when the airports were not congested. It would carry small, high priority packages when speed of delivery was more than the important than cost. It would bring all packages to a central point. He chose his hometown, Memphis, where through a specially designed computer program, the packages would be sorted, dispersed, and loaded on planes that were flown to ultimate destination. By consolidating all shipments to smaller cities, it would enable the company to fly full plane loads to cities all over the country and eventually the world. Smith believed that venture capitalists would be interested and excited about this innovation idea, but to his shock, little interest was developed in the financial community. This did not stop Smith because his enthusiasm for the project and the courage of his convictions, he raised $91 million to finance his untested idea. At this point, the competing carriers realized that Smith's concept was potential threat to their industry. The major airlines tried to forestall this new competition by lobbying the Civil Aeronautics Board to refuse Smith and the necessary permission. Smith's team found a loophole in the law. Planes with the payload under 7,500 pounds did not need CAB permission to operate. Smith went ahead and assembled a fleet of all small jets. He began to construction of his main facility in Memphis and started servicing 75 airports. FedEx would pick up packages at airports all over the country and fly them to Memphis, where they were sorted out and processed for immediate reshipment to other cities. Once unloaded, FedEx trucks delivered them to their destinations. Smith set a goal to get all packages to their destinations within 24 hours of pickup, and this goal was almost always met. Despite the hard work and effort of the company, the first few years were financial disasters. Losses amounted to millions of dollars. The investors were seriously concerned. Federal was falling far short of Smith's projections. Despite the losses which the investors blamed on Smith and even talk of removing him and talking over the company, Smith did not lose faith. His courage never faltered. He hired experts, his mastermind, and worked day and night with them to solve the operational problems. This resulted in federal revenues reaching $75 million in the next fiscal year with a profit of $3.6 million. Although competition from faxes virtually eliminated the use of FedEx for letters and documents, and despite the competition from other air freight companies and the postal service, which offered overnight service at a much lower price, Smith's continued innovation and dedication to continuous improvement have kept Federal as the number one carrier in its field. In Chapter 7 on Organized Planning, you will find complete instructions for marketing every type of service. You will also find detailed information on how to choose the employer you prefer and the particular job you desire. These instructions will be of no value to you unless you definitely decide to organize them into a plan of action.